welcome back to my channel, Taylor Talks Tales. Today I have a book review for you. This was one of the books that I reviewed briefly in my 18 thrillers in 11-day book binge challenge video that I uploaded. In that video I read 18 thrillers in 11 days and then I ranked them from worst to best and kind of gave like a very mini review on each of the books. And I wanted to do not all of them, but for a good chunk of them I do want to do full-fledged book reviews. So this is the first book that I picked because it recently just came out. It came out January of 2020, like I think January 7th was the release date. I don't exactly remember. So I figured there are probably a lot of people who are interested in this book, and I figured I would go ahead and start the review with Long Bright River by Liz Moore. I'm going to read the inside flap and then we're going to get right on into the review. Two sisters travel the same streets, though their lives couldn't be more different. Then one of them goes missing. In a Philadelphia neighborhood rocked by the opioid crisis, two once inseparable sisters find themselves at odds. One, Casey, lives on the streets in the vice of addiction. The other, Mickey, walks those same blocks on her police beat. They don't speak anymore, and the police department has no idea of their connection. But Mickey never stops worrying about her sibling. Then Casey disappears, suddenly, at the same time that a mysterious string of murders begins in Mickey's district, and Mickey panics over her sister's safety. Risking her job, and maybe even the welfare of her 4-year-old son, Mickey becomes dangerously obsessed with finding the culprit, and her sister before it's too late. Alternating the present-day mystery with the story of the sisters' childhood and adolescence, Liz Moore creates a work that is at once heart-pounding and heart-wrenching. Alright, so this book, this was one of the 5 out of 5 star reads for me. I was just blown away by the writing and the characters, and I just found it to be a fantastic book. But I want to start the review off by saying I think it being marketed as a thriller might do this book a bit of a disservice, because I feel like it's more of a mystery crime novel with a lot of like exploration in the opioid crisis and in family dynamics and sister relationships, and it's not really one of those like pulse-pounding popcorn thrillers where you're just super focused on the plot and trying to figure out what's going to happen next. So I think people going into this book expecting that might be a little disappointed, which I can understand. I've definitely been, upset at times when a book is marketed as horror, or like people are saying this is like a really intense book and it's not. It can be disappointing. For me, it worked because I was already interested in just the sister relationship and the exploration into the opioid crisis and how it impacts this small little town that's right outside of Philadelphia, or it's like basically a suburb of Philadelphia. So for me, the fact that this book was so well done and the writing was excellent and the characters were incredibly fleshed out, I was okay with it not being this pulse-pounding thriller. Even if when I picked it up I was expecting some like really big serial killer novel with the backdrop being this opioid crisis, but instead it really focuses a lot on the characters. I think that the characters are very well fleshed out, especially the main character Mickey. She feels like a real person to me, and you see a lot of the struggles that she goes through as a police officer who's one of the few women in her department and in a male-dominated field. Her struggles, you get to see her struggles, being a single mom and juggling being a single mom with having a full-time, fairly high demanding job. And you see her relationship with her sister develop over time because of the dual timeline aspect, where you see how they were as children and teenagers and how it kind of shaped who they ended up becoming later. And even though they started out very similar situation, their mother had died of an overdose, and then their father wasn't really in the picture much afterwards, so they were raised by their grandmother, and their grandmother was not a warm, fuzzy person at all. In fact, I feel like she was kind of borderline abusive at times, not really physically abusive, but just the fact that she withheld so much love and affection and was cold, and she was working so much. She's a very complicated character, and I'm glad that I wasn't raised by her because I could see why the two of them would have some issues. Casey took it a lot harder than Mickey did because they have different personalities, and it's interesting to see how they started out very similar, and this very inseparable and had this like very strong bond, and over time they drifted apart. And Casey got into drugs, and originally she got into them for fun because she was in high school, and this was in like the late 90s, early 2000s, when like OxyContin hit the market, and opioid pills were all the rage, and you could get them very easily, and it was like a party drug, and it quickly spiraled out of control, and going from that into full-blown heroin was just very, very interesting. And they're definitely, I think a strength of this book too is that Liz Moore does a good job of making things seem fairly objective. She doesn't, shame addicts, but she doesn't praise the situation either. She just tells it very objectively, which I thought was very good. The research is very well done. She knows what she's talking about. I actually took a class on the opioid crisis late last year, or the year before that, and so I know a little bit about the subject matter, and I thought, based off of my knowledge, that she did a really good job portraying this. And the town Kensington also kind of takes a life on its own. You can really picture this like rundown, like blue collar, former working class sort of suburb of Philadelphia, and how, it used to be, old school families, Irish American, and sort of like this melting pot of different cultures and ethnicities, and how drugs hit the community and have been kind of just bringing it down, and there are a lot of abandoned shops, and just people wandering the streets in a daze looking for their next fix, and prostitutes wandering around. It really paints a sense of place, and that Mickey really still is invested in this area, and she's also invested in her sister, and especially when her sister disappears, it sparks her trying to figure out what's going on, because she actually isn't really a detective. She's a patrol officer, but she starts investigating, which leads her down a path of figuring out where does this go, who's committing these crimes, is my sister dead? There's a lot going on. And I thought it was very well done. I really rooted for her as a character, and she feels like a real person to me. And the mystery itself, I also felt like it was very real, because it wasn't this like big Hollywood, like, she's on a motorcycle shooting at the killer or anything like that. I felt like the resolution and everything that happened just felt very real, but still captivating, and still gets you engaged in the story. And I do feel like, despite all the heavy subject matters in this book, because there are a lot of heavy subject matters in this, so I will definitely say there are like some trigger warnings for like abuse. There's a 14-year-old girl who gets groomed by an older gentleman. There isn't like statutory rape, but there is grooming going on. Definitely some abuse, and like trigger warning for all types of addictions and addictive habits, and a little bit of violence. But I would say this is nowhere near like Karen Slaughter level violence. In fact, I really don't feel like this is a super violent book. The deaths pretty much happen, like they discover a body, but it's not really described in detail a whole lot. So I wouldn't say there's a whole lot of violence in this. There's some shooting and a little bit of gun violence, and there's a lot of descriptions of like drug paraphernalia, so trigger warning for that. But for the most part, this is heavy, and it's not a lighthearted book, but I felt like it's not a depressing book, which is nice, because I don't mind dark subject matter and heavy subject matter, but I don't typically like it when a book ends on a depressing note, and this doesn't. So anyway, I overall really highly recommend it. I recommend it for pretty much most people, unless you're just looking for a very like simplistic thriller, or just sort of some entertainment, or if you just aren't in the mood for something heavy, don't pick this up, because this is quite heavy, but I think it's worth it, and it tells a really powerful story, and I think it's very relevant to what's going on right now in the United States. There are Kensingtons all over, and situations like this all over, and it definitely brings that up. And I think this would be a very good book to discuss with other people, especially because there's like certain decisions that some of the characters make, kind of that questionable area of tough love versus enabling especially with addicts. I think that is something that a lot of people who are touched by addiction kind of struggle with, is how far can I support somebody before I'm enabling them? Do I just cut them off? Do I do this? Do I that? Do I do that? How do I support myself and also support another person? And what are my needs and what are their needs? And can people reconcile and all that? So it brings up a lot of important themes, I think. So anyway, please go check it out. Long Bright River by Liz Moore. It is a fantastic book. Highly recommend. Just be in the mood for it. Anyway, if you've read this book, let me know what you thought of it. If you're planning on reading it, and you finish it, let me know if you enjoy it. And please like, comment, rate, subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later, and we'll be back with a couple more thriller reviews in the next couple days. So thank you so much and have a great day.